Welcome. The documentary screening of Black Lives in Alberta, Over a Century of Racial Injustice continues. The film shares the story of 5 generations of Black Albertans and their experiences of discrimination living in Western Canada. In the film, the descendants of the African American immigrants who moved to Western Canada in the early 20th century to escape racism, persecution in the United States share their families' histories and discuss how their racial identities have shaped their experiences of living in Alberta. Enjoy.
Thank you. Okay, let me share this screen.
I think a lot of people want to say, oh, we're not like the States. We don't have racism here, but that racism is happening here. And the first thing that you can do to help is to acknowledge it and listen to the people that are telling you that it's happening.
There's a lot of racism embedded in the history here. So when you do walk around, it's something that you think about like every day, pretty much.
Kids would be like, no, you can't hang with us because you're Black, or you can't, that type of thing.
And the people who you're supposed to trust and who are supposed to like have your back and be your kind of champions and like your heroes aren't there. It's like, how do you even trust authority?
When they're looking at you with disdain or disgust or whatever it is, you know.
It's embarrassing to call someone out because when they're talking to you like you're below them, you almost feel like you get put in that position below them and you believe it. So it's hard to like speak up to someone who's treating you that way.
It's very important that our people be recognized. We've been through all kinds of discrimination and adversity and marginalization from the moment we stepped across the border. They put us in places where they thought we'd never succeed, in the small settlements, but in spite of, we succeeded. And we just want to tell our story and the struggles that we had, and to make sure that our history isn't forgotten.
The story of Black settlers in Alberta begins over 100 years ago. From 1905 to 1912, between 1,000 and 1,500 African Americans moved from the United States to Western Canada in the hopes of finding a better life. Many of the families came from Oklahoma, which became a state in 1907. The newly formed state introduced new laws called Jim Crow laws, which made life increasingly difficult and dangerous for Black people living there.
They introduced Jim Crow laws, which took away the dignity of the Black person, more or less, because they couldn't vote after that. They separated the races. They had separate schools, separate washrooms, separate drinking fountains, separate restaurants, and so on. And so the whole atmosphere changed.
Life became extremely dangerous for Black people living in Oklahoma, as well as other southern states, with tensions between Black and white people often leading to violence. At the same time, the Canadian government was trying to recruit individuals to settle on the Canadian prairies, land that had been previously occupied by Indigenous people prior to their forced removal from their traditional territories. Thousands of advertisements were distributed by the Canadian government via posters and in American newspapers, encouraging Americans to move to the last best West, where 160 acres of land could be secured for the fee of $10. While the majority of the African American settlers came from Oklahoma, individuals also moved from Mississippi, Iowa, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Texas to escape the violent racism that was rampant in the United States.
When we came, they didn't realize that Black people were coming. We were, of course, met with a lot of trouble at the border. And there's a lot of documentation about that in the papers and in the government records that they didn't want Blacks here in Alberta.
In the spring of 1911, in the city of Edmonton, concerns about the arrival of large numbers of African Americans resulted in the Edmonton Board of Trade petitioning Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier to prohibit any further migration of Black people from the United States.
We, the residents of the city of Edmonton, urge upon your attention the serious menace to the future welfare of a large portion of Western Canada, the alarming influx of Negro settlers.
Responding to the public's concerns, the Canadian government passed an order in council banning Black people from moving to Canada for a period of 1 year. Fortunately, the order in council was repealed before it became law. The government's efforts to prohibit the migration of African Americans to Canada was combined with pressure at the border. Border agents informed newcomers that the climate was unsuitable for Black people, imposed financial conditions, and implemented rigorous medical exams. These actions effectively brought the migration wave to an end by 1912. But by then, between 1,000 and 1,500 individuals had already made the move.
We came anyway. We had the right amount of money. We had skills. We had everything that they said on their checklist. So they had to let us in.
Between 1908 and 1911, the African Americans who migrated to the prairies established 5 settlements. In Alberta, residents established Wildwood, Amber Valley, Campsie, and Breton. And in Saskatchewan, several families settled in the Eldon district near the town of Maidstone.
They decided, well, we're going to take our wagons and we're going to head out that way. Now, my grandfather told me when I was a little guy, and I can't remember how old I was, I must have been maybe 10 or 11 or something like that. He said that, you know, we went out there and it took us 3 weeks to get there by horse and buggy. And I'm thinking, oh, this sounds like a grandpa yarn. But as I talked to more people, well, there was no roads. All the roads was build your own, make a trail. Some places where you had to go through with the horses, the horse wouldn't even go through. They had to cut the trees out of there so the horses could get through. Forging rivers, forging creeks, going through muskeg. So when you put that all together, that's quite a undertaking to get out there, right?
The Black settlers living on the prairies worked hard to develop their communities. They cleared thousands of acres of land and established churches, small businesses, and local schools. For children attending these rural schools, their experience was mainly a positive one.
We had a one-room school, 42 pupils and one teacher, and she taught from 1 to 8. It was 3 white families in that whole community. And the ones that I went to school with, it's just, you didn't know the difference.
Wildwood School was very interesting. I remember some of my first classrooms I walked into, and you know, there was a lot of Black people, a lot of Black kids in there, as well as whites and whatever else was around. I never heard a lot of problems about the racisms and stuff like that. I did hear the N-word a bit, so there was a lot of Ukrainians, Germans, Polish people, that type of thing. They were coming in. So I think it was kind of one of those things. We all want to kind of get along.
For Campsie, they had decided they were going to have a segregated school, a separate school for the Black kids. By the time it actually happened, there was other immigrants that had moved in, and they sent their kids there. So it was basically, it wasn't a segregated, we always laugh and say it's the first segregated, non-segregated school that was built up there.
Other families and individuals decided to head to the city, like Calgary or Edmonton. Their experiences there were generally very different. Black people living in Edmonton faced discrimination and racism on a daily basis. In 1924, the city of Edmonton proposed a rule that would ban Black people from using city pools. The Black community protested to city council, convincing them not to go forward with the ban. Community leaders, including the reverends from both of Edmonton's predominantly Black churches, also protested against other injustices against the Black community, including the exclusion of Black children in nearby Campsie from attending their local school for over 5 years due to their skin color, as well as the racially offensive parade floats on display during the Edmonton exhibition, some of which included Black men locked up in cages. Businesses in Edmonton routinely refused to offer work to Black men or women, so job opportunities were extremely limited. Black men worked on the railway or in slaughterhouses or other low-income jobs including construction work, and women worked as domestic housekeepers. Children attending Edmonton schools experienced frequent discrimination.
The teacher reads a story about little black Sambo, and then you go out in the schoolyard for recess, and other kids would have a great time taunting you because all of a sudden you became little black Sambo, and there'd be all kinds of names that they would use to, rile you up.
Going to school was hideous at first. There was a girl in the class that said she lost her book. And the teacher said, "Oh, where did you see it last?" "Well, she had it." And she pointed to me. I said, "I didn't have her book. I didn't see it." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I am certain I haven't touched her book. I haven't seen it." But they came and searched my desk. I didn't have it. But you think they'd leave me alone? They called the police and sent me home in the police car. And my dad just about had a fit. He seen me sitting in the police car, and they weren't nice. And Dad says, "No, she didn't steal any books because we don't have any books." And I said, "I didn't steal her book, Dad." He asked me, "Did you see it?" I said, "I didn't even see it." But they accused me, and they couldn't find it. So they had to leave,
I just think that where you were, it just happened. Like when you were going home from school and there'd be kids standing around in their little groups and, want to call you names. You weren't bothering them. You were just on your way home or on your way to school, and it didn't have to be anything particular. They just wanted to call you names.
Well, I did act up a little bit in school and that, joke around, but the teacher had her back to me. And I was trying to get this, we had tests coming up. So I was trying to really concentrate, and the kids were giggling. And the kid on the right of me, he took a bobby pin, he shot it, and it bounced off the thing and come down in front of the teacher. And the teacher turned around, she looked, and I looked up. So she focused on me and she said, "Okay." She said, "You get out of my class and go down to the office and tell the principal you've been shooting stuff around the room." I said, "I didn't do it." I said, "I didn't want to rat on anybody," and I just said, "I didn't do it." She says, "You get out of here." So I jumped up and I walked down the back stairs. I was 15 years old, and out the side door, and then never went back.
For many Black students, negative experiences in school and a lack of opportunity for further education limited their career prospects.
I've had a really hard time identifying as Black because I have really light skin and I don't necessarily look like my family members. I remember as a child, I would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm Indigenous." And my mom would be like, you're part Black too. And I'd be like, yeah, Mom, I'm part Black too. But I'd be embarrassed to tell people because I'd be like, they're not going to think I'm Black. I don't look Black. So I think it's been a long journey. I think I would identify as an Indigenous woman who is also part Black as well. And I think as time goes on, I'll become more comfortable with that.
My heritage is African and Caucasian. So for the most part, people didn't really like see any race other than like white in me. The first time I actually knew I was Black was in grade 3 when my friend was like, we're brothers, we're Black brothers.
Developing a consciousness as a Black female is hard when you're a half Black female, especially because you grow up in an environment that sometimes doesn't cater to the fact that you're Black. My stepmom is a white woman, so it's not like we had, all this Black culture in my house. I didn't have a lot of Black culture other than what was coming from my father's side. But I think that when you're growing up, it's that feeling of being other than the people that are around you. So the first time you experience racism, well, you decide, well, if that's what they see me as, then that's what I am. I am Black. And I would rather be a Black woman when I walk into a room because then I can identify myself. School was okay when I was younger. It was okay. I know when I was in elementary, especially being a poor kid, like I think that the teachers at my school, some of them didn't like that. Like they treated poor kids a little bit worse. I had teachers say offhand comments sometimes. I had a teacher one time who said, if your arms were any longer, you'd be the gorilla, like, stuff like that. But you don't think about it as racism.
This kid, he was a year older than me. I think I was in grade 3, and we were walking home, and kids are talking smack to each other, like normal kid things. But I remember he looked at me and he said, yeah, well, Black people should still be slaves. And to this day, have never really felt like a rage like that just build out of me, like out of nowhere.
I think that little me was, like scared and a little bit angry and didn't understand why and felt very ugly and very, just not the same as everybody else. But you don't know why you don't feel the same because nobody talks to you about it when you're growing up, right? Like you're just supposed to feel the same as everybody. But when you walk into a classroom and you're the only Black person, you notice that.
I didn't really have many people that looked like me or teachers that looked like me. I dealt with some like underlying racism and certain things that I don't think other students really had to deal with. Like I'm just thinking of one experience that I had. I was in my grade 7 science class, and there's unfortunately a couple of people sitting around me, and they were talking. And I remember the teacher just stood me right up, yelled at me, and asked me on the spot, Destiny, are you on drugs? And I remember I was not even like a part of the situation. It was so embarrassing and like belittling. And that was like one of the first issues that I had, definitely, that I remember in school.
In junior high school, I had a couple. Our teachers literally called us the brown girls because we were the only dark-skinned girls or even close to dark-skinned girls in the school. But it was me, 2 other Black girls, an Indigenous girl, and 2 East Indian girls. So not all of us were Black, but they grouped us all in together. Once it got into junior high and high school, that's when things get a little bit more, people get a little bit bolder as you get older. Kids in school, like in high school, would make jokes about picking cotton, like that kind of stuff. But kids they have no empathy, so they don't really think about those kind of things. There was some boys behind me in class who used to throw bits of paper and stuff at my hair, hoping it would stick or something like that.
I think a lot of schools have issues with pushing minorities into second streams in schools. My high school tried to force me into second streams. And instead of the 30-1 programs, they tried to put me not even in 30-2, they tried to put me in like 30-3, which unfortunately in those streams, you can't really get an education after that. So it really impedes how you live your life after high school as well. It wasn't unusual. I was fully aware of what was happening and how people were treating me differently. And I just remember being very angry, and then I was sad. And I was like, why is this happening to me? Like, what have I done to deserve this kind of thing? And I think people don't realize that when kids are getting like pushed to the side, that they realize what's happening and they can see it happening to them. And they might not express it through like their actions or their words right away, but they definitely internalize that. And it kind of changes how they react to things in the world for sure.
The daily routine for us at like recess and whatnot was like playing soccer. That was like we did every single day, rain or sun, snow, it didn't matter. But it was rough, like kids play rough. And I remember everybody would always kind of like slide talk each other, but I remember I was always the one who got sent to the office for doing the exact same thing that everybody else was doing. Again, in the moment, didn't think anything of it, just thought I was just getting picked on because I was bigger than everybody else. When you're a kid, you're 7 years old, you don't think that the world's racist. You don't see those kind of things. And my parents never really took the time to explain to me kind of like what was going on. Because I remember when I talked to my dad, when I realized this like years later, so like a month ago, he was like, you just realized this now? But like they never really pointed it out to me then, so I didn't realize. We knew we were Black, you know what I mean? So like you're aware of it. But those conversations, like when I would come home or like, because obviously the school calls my parents, right? Yeah, they never really were like, hey man, this could be because you're Black. They were just kind of like, be better.
A lot of my, I think, high school and end of junior high, people would be like, you can't play basketball. You're not good at basketball because you're not Black, man. You're white. Or it'd be like, you're not Black, Chris. You're white. Come on. Stop saying you're Black. You're white. And I guess mentally that kind of like made me like identify as like, oh, I'm white. But then like, since my African friends are like, no, man, you're Black. So I just start to embrace that. It's really hard to be a racist football player. It's really hard. Like you're not going to go very far if you're a racist football player because you're around all different walks of life, all different races, right? But that's not to say that I haven't had any. There's definitely been times where there's guys that make comments that are definitely like kind of rub you the wrong way that make you uncomfortable. But the first time it happened was when I was a rookie, and rookies tend to stay together. It's kind of the only way to survive. So we're walking to the train one day, and I remember this white kid said the N-word, and I was like, obviously very taken aback, right? I'm in a group of like all Black kids, all from Calgary, and this one white kid from Calgary says the N-word, and I remember being like, don't say the N-word, very, very explicitly.
There is tons of underlying racism in hockey, unfortunately. And unfortunately, people of color are treated subhuman during hockey by the parents, by the coaches, and it's kind of ingrained in the entire sport, which is a really unfortunate thing because I loved hockey and I loved playing hockey. The things that people were allowed to get away with saying, it was just insane to me. And I think people are just like, oh, like it's hockey, like that's just the way hockey is. But like people need to stop making those excuses. I remember walking through the hallways to get on the ice and I would have people screaming racist things at me. And it's just like, why is that okay? Like, how can you allow people on your hockey team or allow people in the arena to feel that way? This is where they're learning the racism. This is where they're learning it's okay, and it's okay to say those things about people. These are kids 9 and 8 years old. Like, why are they hearing those words or hearing people talk to other people like that? It's just not okay.
I think that you become kind of like a code switcher, where when you're around certain groups of people, you act completely differently because you don't want to be perceived a certain way. Little me would try very, very hard to always be very presentable, more presentable than maybe my white counterparts, because I didn't want anybody to look at me and think, oh, well, that's just some lazy Black girl or whatever they think. Like, I don't know what they think, but that's some of the things that like I would think about every single day waking up, is to make sure that I was very presentable and that I was smart and that I was polite to everybody and probably with the smile on my face.
Being the best, I think, is tied to race, and that idea that you want to be the best. The way I view things is I don't think you're going to ever change anybody's mind by yelling at them. You have to show them like visually and make them feel things, right? But that requires being better than people. Like that requires exceeding what they think of you and being better. A lot of who I am today is because of like the experiences that I had back then, because like to not get in trouble, I had to be better than everybody else. So it's why I'm a very ambitious person. So I hold myself to a very high standard today. I think regrettably ended up being like the token Black kid in like a lot of instances at Ainley. Like I was I'm well-spoken. I got good grades. I played football. I was a captain. Like, I like check every box. I came from not the best area. So it's like for them, they can be like, look what we can do. We took this kid from Mill Woods and now he's a great A-League grad. He's going to U of A. He's a captain of the Bears. He's this, he's that, right? But it's like, that's not why I do these things. I don't do it for anybody else. I do it because, like I said, I'm an ambitious person. I have goals. But I did the right things, right? Like, I'm not an argumentative guy. I'm not super confrontational, right? I just kind of go with the flow, and I did what they wanted me to do. You know what I mean? Like, even if they didn't say it out loud, no, we need you to go do these things. I was a model student for them and a model Black kid, I would say now.
I think if I would have had Black teachers or Indigenous teachers or teachers of color, I think it would have made a huge change for me, especially growing up as an adolescent. I think those are sensitive times and you're very emotional and you're kind of trying to figure out who you are as a person. So when you don't see teachers that look like you or people in positions of power that look like you kind of get this like background thought of like, oh, can I be that type of person? Like, can I have that type of job? And as much as you want to say like, oh, why does that matter? It makes a huge difference. If you don't see a Black lawyer or a Black teacher, that's not even going to come up in your brain kind of as, oh, that's like a career for me to try and go for, because you don't see anyone that looks like you in that position. So
I think about little me and how she felt at that time and how she grew up feeling like not pretty or, you know, just not as good as anybody else, because that's how you feel kind of when you're Black, like, and you don't see any girls in the movies who look like you or girls on TV who look like you, or it's the one girl who looks like you, but she's always the hip hop girl or whatever it is.
I think it can prevent you, from reaching out to a lot of things. And I think it made a huge impact on my life personally. I think if I would have had a teacher of color that I could go and talk to and have someone that's like, you know what, I've experienced some of that too. I understand what you're going through, instead of just like a pat on the shoulder, like, oh, I get it, I'm so sorry, from someone who has no idea what you're even talking about. It makes a huge difference on how you interact with the people around you and I think your life.
I think we have to recognize that we're more than our color. You know, we're more than just color. So many of us have so many different background places that we've come from. You know, if everybody would start checking out their history and see just how multifaceted they are, they would stop trying to point the finger and say, well, I'm better than you, or this culture's better than that culture.
Ignorance isn't a lifelong sentence, and it's not something that needs to be punished, in my opinion. Ignorance is something that needs to be fixed, but only through education.
I think that's one of the reasons I'm doing this project, is because there's so many people that don't know that, like, we have been here for 100 years. Like, get over it. Let's move on.
I think when you have empathy, it allows you that moment of reflection and of remembering that the person who's across from you in whatever the situation is another person. They have people who they love and who love them. They have goals, they have ambitions, they have dreams, just like you, regardless of the situation. Everybody's the same. So if you have even just a little bit of empathy, it goes a long way.
You don't have to be Black or white or anything, but how you identify that will bring in different things into your life. I think that part of it is not relating race so much to the things that we like, the hobbies that we have, the clothes that we wear, anything. You know, if one day I want to dress like Beyonce circa 1999 and the next day I want to dress like Reese Witherspoon in Legally Blonde, whatever it is, it should be allowed and it should be okay, and you should feel empowered to do those things, not because you're a Black woman that you need to act Black and be Black and wear box braids in your hair if you don't want to, if that's not who you are. But if it is, and if I decide tomorrow to put a bunch of braids in my hair, I don't want someone to tell me all of a sudden, well, you look very Black now, you know, which has happened. I think just like what you like and be firm in that, and be mindful of the people around you and who you attract into your life, because a lot of those times those people are brought on by values, not your race.
You have to take these experiences as you go and hopefully use them to turn you into a better person. I think that if you get angry and you hold these things in, that they affect you somewhat in a negative way. So you have to kind of learn how to use these experiences to make you a better person, and hopefully the people around you better people as well.
Always be educating, educate those around you, educate yourself. If you feel as though that when you're educating and you feel as though someone, puts the education back on you, you have to be willing to accept that and, be like, okay, well, these people are saying these things for a reason. Does it actually like make sense from where they're coming from? And can I utilize that in my worldview from then on?
Talk to each other and kind of find out from your Black friends, like, hey, what's a struggle for you? Is there anything that I can do for you that would help you out? Or if you're in a room full of white people and you're a white person and somebody says something that's untoward, say something back. Because if you're not speaking up to that person and you're not correcting them, then you are 100% just as much part of the problem, because we have to keep each other accountable. So I think people should stop being so scared to talk about race and how it affects us differently, because there's like a whole world behind that,
It is very important, youth of today, of tomorrow, even people my age, to be proud of who you are, where you came from, and to honor our past, so the future will be much, much better. And one day, like Martin Luther King said, and all the other great leaders and people who persevered no matter what, to stand and be counted and to be recognized as equals. So that's one day I'm looking forward to that.